Okay, again, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon or this morning for the webinar on preparing a successful EPA job training grant proposal. We will be joined by, we are happy to have speakers today from our other tab providers, Marissa Koyo with the Yukon tab program. We will also hear from Carrie Staton with the West Virginia tab program. Today's webinar is being recorded, so if you hear any information today and you want to circle back, you can definitely do that. There's also a link in the chat for today's presentation slides, so you can access those materials there. Throughout today's webinar, if you have any questions, go ahead and use the chat feature here in Zoom to answer your questions, and we will try to get those done. We will also have some final Q&A questions at the end of the webinar. Everybody, all the participants are muted and videos off just to allow for good bandwidth and to be respectful of our speakers. But again, if you have questions, you can go ahead and put those into the chat and we will make sure to get those addressed. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Marissa.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Maggie. Hello, everyone. I'm Marissa Koyo, and I'm the program director for the TAB program in EPA Region 1. So today's webinar has the following objective. So we are not going to repeat the guidelines and the details that is in the RFP. There is an EPA June 14th webinar recording on the EPA job training website for that. But rather, we will provide more guidance on how to address these guidelines and specifically tips on how to put together a successful proposal. So let's start with the first rule of grant writing, which is keep calm and follow the rubric. And even though that seems very intuitive, my experience with working with a lot of people writing grants is that the devil is in the details. So let me show you what the rubric looks like and what I mean by follow the rubric. So when you open the RFA for the FY24 job training grants and you navigate to page 31, section 5 has the evaluation criteria. So it is important that you do not only look at section 4 that tells you what the content is supposed to be, but that you go to the application review information section and start navigating through the points. So read through of that carefully, and this is what the judges and the reviewers are going to be doing. Every sentence in that rubric has to be addressed for you to be getting full points. And let me show you a more detailed example of what I mean. So this shows, it's part of this year's rubrics, and it addresses a part, I think it's 1B, labor market demand. So it's this full paragraph that says different things. So if you really break this down, then there are 4 key points that you should be addressing. So there should be at least one sentence or a paragraph, depending, that addresses each of these points. So you have to provide a description of the local labor market survey that you conducted. And specifically, you need to detail both the methods and the results of the steps taken to assess that and the time period associated with your assessment. You need to discuss what certifications you are proposing, as identified, and how the training curriculum you're proposing will equip students for high quality jobs. So if it is helpful, take that rubric and split it into individual sentences like that. And at the end, when you put together your proposal, go back and check yourself. Did you really hit each of those individual points that are in the rubric? So the reviewers will go back, and for example, if you did not indicate the time period associated with your assessment, they'll take a point off, right? So that's a helpful way to double check yourself that you followed the rubric in detail. Now let's look at the overview of the sections and the points. and the length of the section should be roughly proportional to the points assigned to those. So you have 200 points that correspond to 12 pages. And there can be some variation. So if you go back and look at successful grants, not all of them have the exact same length per section, but more or less the points reflect the level of detail and the importance that that section has. So here are some guidelines. I will not read them all in detail. You can go back and look at the slides and kind of like refer to them later. So you want about 2.5 pages for your community need and 2 pages for your larger sections that are the community and employment partnerships. By far your largest section is going to be the program structure, anticipated outputs and outcomes. So 3 and 3.5 pages for that. So if you have this structure in mind as you're writing the grant, then you will kind of like keep yourself in check so that you don't write 5 pages for community need and then you don't have space for the rest. So start planning before you put together the grant. Now, we will go into in those different sections and discuss the items that you should be discussing for full points. So your first community description has 20 points that are equally distributed between 4 sections. So you need to describe your city and region and identify your target area. So your target area may be your entire city or your entire region if you are a regional planning agency, or a subpart of that. So the rubric calls for you describing both the larger jurisdiction of your unit and then also what the specific target area is where you will be recruiting people from. You want to describe the community challenges, and those have to be tied to why you justified the target area. Is there unemployment? Is it an environmental justice community? And this is why you're doing the target area description. And then you want to describe how the project will mitigate exposure and support the health and welfare of the communities. And this is an easy place where you can lose points. Because you're thinking, this is a job training grant. How is it going to mitigate exposure? Well, remember that everything is linked. So the idea here is that you are creating a workforce that will support brownfield redevelopment within your community. So you're not training people in one place who will go and work necessarily, in the next region over. So you will say that this particular area is an environmental justice community. It has certain, brownfield and other environmental challenges. We are training people who will live and work in these communities. They will help, be engaged in environmental projects. And through that way, they will, exposure to the contaminants of the projects they will work on, will be mitigated. And so through that and through these quality jobs, health and welfare of these communities will be supported. So do not forget to close that loop at the end, because essentially this is what the EPA strategic objective is. So you have to be explicit about how your project is going to meet that. Then you need to provide some demographics and explain how these demographics demonstrate an underserved community. I will show you a little more on that. And then identify high need groups that will benefit for the project. And so here you want to talk about, for example, how are you going to recruit veterans? How are you going to recruit people with disabilities for certain jobs that are conducive to that? How are you going to recruit underserved communities with high unemployment and welfare needs? So this may feel that it's not different compared to this section, but it actually is more targeted into the specific groups that will be employed for your project. Whereas the one up here is more about how the project is benefiting your community and your target area as a whole. So make that distinction. So how are you going to define your target area? There are 3 intertwined considerations for you to do that. The first one is obviously the scope and the reach of your organization. If you are, are you operating at the city level, the regional level, or the county level, depending, on what you are, and who are you, who you're working with, what your community is. That, will also kind of like dictate the limits of your grant. Now, if you're a regional or a county level community, you may, want to look at your entire region, but you may also want to choose a subset of that. So you need to consider the two following criteria. The first one will be that your target area has to have a demonstrated community need and meet the criteria of the Justice for Initiative. So that is a key criterion that gets a lot of points, and I will go into the next slides of what that means. But then you also need to demonstrate that that particular region and the community need is of sufficient size where you can have a good target number of trainees, of jobs, and employers associated with your training program. So if you're looking at like a small town, that's probably too small for you to be like really reaching a small training grant. So you need to be looking at an area that can really support those type of jobs. Think, how many brownfields do you actually have? How many other related projects do you actually have that can support these training grants? So all of these three things have to be equally kind of like targeted for your target area. Okay, so disadvantaged community, and what does that mean? So your disadvantaged community needs to meet the definition under the Justice for Initiative, and the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool shows you areas that are considered disadvantaged under that. I will show you in a second, where you can map that, but it is important that you also kind of like have a sense of what are the different factors that go under the definition of a disadvantaged community, because you can use those like poverty, like linguistic isolation, cost burdens. If you have additional indicators that meet your particular region, make sure that you articulate that and in your write-up, beyond just like, yes, my community is disadvantaged. Say something more about it, compared to all these criteria that go into it. So that said, EJ Screen has a tool where you can basically see if your particular community meets the definition of disadvantaged criteria or not. And I will navigate for a second to my browser here, so I can show you how that works. So if you go to EJ Screen, this is just the landing page of the tool. You have to go up here to the left and click on Places, and then there is a Justice 40, and then you can click on IPA Disadvantaged Communities. And it will take a minute to load because I'm showing the entire map here. And then you can either navigate to your particular, so we'll navigate here to Massachusetts. Now it's taking a second, but it is repopulating. So you can see that you can zoom in and kind of like tell where, you have different disadvantaged communities. A little slow, apologies for that, but you can click on a particular tract and it can tell you whether it's disadvantaged or not, and how many categories meets those criteria, and what criteria are there. And so you can get supplemental indices if you want, but the main information that you need is here. So this information is given by census tract. So if you are looking at a community as a whole, or a city as a whole, or a couple of cities as a whole, you need to figure out what census tracts you have, and then kind of like, say, for example, we are targeting here the city of Lawrence that has 10 census tracts, and 6 of them meet the definition of disadvantaged communities. And then if you're wondering how are you going to find census tracts, you can just Google census tract reference map, and that will bring you to this page. And then you can go navigate, for example, to your state, your county, and that will give you like a list of, will give you a PDF map of all the census tracts. So you can correspond your city or your county with the census tract maps that you want. So that is your first stop to see if your disadvantaged community meets, if your community meets the disadvantage or not. And then the next step is to kind of like fill out this table that is a format for demographic information. So the table here calls for population, unemployment, poverty rate, median household income, and percent minority. But I also want to highlight here that it essentially tells you that if you have additional information, like for example, you have minority population, you have veteran population, these are, you can include additional rows as you wish. And in the solicitation, this table calls for the American Community Survey from 2014 and has the relevant data from there. However, if you actually go and look online, the information that's available right now is from the ACS 2021 survey. So do not use this data because it's very old, but update it with the newest one. And if you do that, I actually have the data for you here. So this little box includes this data, the national level for the ACS 2021 5-year community survey. So you can copy and paste that into your table. Now, I do want to also spend a quick minute to show you how to find the American Community Survey data. And we have a whole video in the Yukon Tab website, but I do want to spend a quick minute here and show you that. So if you go to datacensus.gov site, you can click on Explore Tables. And then you need to go and click on Filters. And you want to go to Surveys, American Community Survey, 5-year estimates, click on Data Profiles, and these, the social, economic, and housing characteristics, demographic and housing estimates are the ones that you want. So after you click on that, you can go back to geography and say, okay, I want to see something for, the state of Connecticut. And then I want to see also, so you can add that geography here. So now this adds Connecticut to the table, and then you go back and say, I want to go to a census tract. I want to go to Connecticut, Fairfield County. You need to know what census tract, again, you're looking for and choose that. So I will just pick one at randomly here. And then all of that comes up. So all the information is here, and you can download it in an Excel spreadsheet and then populate your table. So I know that was fast, but you can rewatch the video later on, to get the additional information. All right, and last thing that I want to show you about demographics is EJ Screen. So you can use the environmental justice indices to talk about the environmental challenges in your area, but you also want to use here the socioeconomic indicators and the health disparities to show the issues in your community. And very quickly, I want to show you how to get a report for that. So I will stay here in my Lawrence area, but now I will go out of the tool, and I will go here and say under reports, I will say select city, and I will click in my city of Methuen of Massachusetts that I want. I can also select a tract or multiple census tracts, but at the end, I will click on EJ Screen Community Report, which is a new feature that is just available in the new version 2.2 of EJ Screen. And that it will take a minute, but then it will bring this up. So it will bring up the population, people of color, breakdown, and so on and so on. So then you can save this and go through all this data and pick and choose the ones that kind of like work out for your community. Okay, so that's, those are the different tools that you can use to establish your community need. Let's go now to part 1B, which is the labor market demand. So I apologize here that I only have region 1 state data. I put this together for a webinar that I did for region 1 last year, and it was not possible that I do it for every state. But what I want to say here is that there is a Department of Labor information by geography website under bls.gov and regions that you can click on, and then you can navigate to the region that is relevant to you. And then every state typically has a site from the corresponding Department of Labor that provides its own data. So go to your state Department of Labor and go to the labor market information and pull out the information that is relevant to you. So that is going to be one of the places that you want to obtain relevant data for the environmental sector. And then certain people, you can reach out to some big employers in your particular area that will be the potential employers and kind of like ask them. You can go to tools like Glassdoor and see how many jobs have been posted in the last years. And then you can send out a survey. If you haven't already, it's probably too late for you to be doing that. You can also send like a quick 3-minute Survey Monkey and see what people need, and then use the information for that and put it in your proposal. And some people in successful proposals in the past have used paid services. Kumura is just one of them where, again, if you haven't done that already, it's probably too late for you to do so, but you can consider it for future proposals. Now, if you're not sure who are going to be the environmental employers in your region, there are typically, again, I'm sorry that I have only the EPA Region 1 lists, but this just gives you a sense of what many states actually have. So they will have, if they have licensed environmental professionals type of programs, they will keep lists of those. But even if they don't, they do have environmental consultant lists. And almost all states have lists of approved asbestos and lead contractors and lists of approved waste transporter and spill contractors. So those are the ones that are going to be your starting point for a good list of environmental employers that you may want to survey, and you may also want to include in your labor market demand. Now, let's go to the actionable training program description. So the things that you want to have in the proposal is what number and types of courses you're offering, who's going to provide that course. It may you or may not be you, and I'll discuss that in a second. What is going to be the level of training, entry level, or for more experienced workers, the certification, the duration, and how many times you're going to offer this. So if your grant is for don't remember now if the social facilitation is 3 or 4 years, but you're not going to offer your training program only once, but you may offer it like 6 times or 12 times, depending, or is it a monthly, or is it 3 months, it is a 6 months program. And then finally, what is going to be the cost to the program per course, right? So if you're spending like $300,000-$400,000 and you're doing this like 50 times, what is the average cost per course? So you need to have the 40-hour HAZWOPER program and the associated certification, which you may be offering yourself or in collaboration with a provider. But you can have a very wide array of green jobs that are related to brownfields. So you can include those jobs, but mention, make a mention of how these are related to brownfields. At the end of the day, these are brownfield grants. So for example, if you have like a CDL license, you can relate them to like hazardous waste transport, like that sort of thing. And this year, if you go to the pages 3 to 6 of the RFA, has the entire list of jobs that are eligible for this. So you can tell, that there's like a 3-page long document that you can draw from. And go also to the Brownfields Toolbox Best Practices document. If you just Google this, it will come up and it will tell you more things. Now, supplemental training program elements that you can include, but they are not eligible for EPA funds, are life skills, adult literacy and employability, construction skills, and natural resource extraction. You can say, for example, that our program will be supplemented by life skills through something else. Like if you have another program, an adult education program in your jurisdiction, you can use that as leveraging and say that it will work hand in hand with your particular program. But you are not eligible to actually charge EPA for those supplemental skills. So some highlights, for eligible courses that you can include. For green infrastructure, stormwater management at brownfield sites and renewable energy or energy efficiency at brownfield sites during the redevelopment are related jobs. Ecological restoration and horticulture, landscaping, urban agriculture. Again, these may be part of the redevelopment or the final end use of a brownfield site. So you want to make that connection. Disaster worker certification related to like climate, extreme events and emergencies, first responder, climate resilience. So I'm not including here typical brownfield jobs. I'm sure you're all aware. I just want to highlight here, that you really want to think outside of the box and have a training program that will allow you to have a wide range of jobs and have like a robust recruitment program. So the key considerations when you write a successful proposal is that the different parts have to tie together. So your skills that you are building through your training program must be tied to the outcomes of the labor market demand section, the employer needs. So if you said, over here that, oh, we need a lot of people in, hazardous waste management, but now you are doing a lot of training on the energy sector, you have not tied those things together. So if you are building the program with, 5 types of jobs, you need to make sure that your labor market demand is really linked to that. And then both of those have to be addressing community need and the profile. So here you're talking again for, like if you're talking about high unemployment, if you're talking about, let's say veterans or things like that, you need to make sure that the skills that you're building are related to your community needs. If possible, if there are redevelopment efforts for certain brownfields in your specific region, tie those to them. Look up what assessment and cleanup grants have been funded in your area in the past, year or two. That will tell you something about what projects and what redevelopment efforts are underway that will actually be able to employ your trainees. This is another important aspect of content providers. You really do not have to go it alone. You don't have to provide everything as a single in a single place. You can partner with community colleges, with environmental health and safety training providers, especially for HAZWOPER, with workforce development agencies, if you're not one, have guest lecturers and consultants, and partner together with trade schools. And in fact, how many of these partnerships you have is going to be one of the criteria by which you are going to be judged. Now, let's go to the budget. Make sure you use the table, and you use the table with these 4 tasks, and they are here, and these budget categories. Make the life of your reviewers and of the EPA program managers easy. So do not modify this if something is not applicable to you. For example, you may not have contractual, or you may not have travel. It depends what you have. You want to make sure that you keep this table as it is, so that you make the life easy for the reviewers. Note here for the either category that participant support costs and stipends should be included under the other category. And I will explain that in a second. So this started last year and it's ongoing for this year. So they're eligible for new grantees. So for this season as well. So you can pay for transportation for trainees, for site visits during training, and to and from class. You can have reasonable stipends to compensate trainees for participating in training. So what are reasonable? Well, think about how many hours they are going to be there. So, and have like a reasonable time, you can say, I have 100 hours worth of training times like 20 hours, it will be XYZ, right? So stipends may only be paid for actual time spent or on-the-job training activities, and cannot duplicate training support through other federal, state, tribal, or local programs. And you can have childcare subsidies as well. The maximum of this portion is 40% of the total budget. And, we really encourage you to have that, the participant support costs, because this is what it's going to encourage people it's going to just help your recruitment so much. Your outputs and outcomes, what do you want? What do you want to have? And you can include a table like this as I have them, or you can have them also in a narrative format. So your outputs are measurable outputs that are more in the short term, within kind of like the life of the grant and shortly after that. So you want to include the number of students, how many you're going to complete, your job placement rate. So you should have a tracking mechanism and talk about what is going to be your criterion for success, your number of trainings, your number of certifications, and specifically the number of individuals with HAZWOPER certification. And then the longer term outcomes are not necessarily measurable, but they're more like longer term benefits, and you should relate them again to your community needs. So tie back to what you wrote before. So increased community access to environmental jobs, enhanced labor availability for green jobs in EJ communities, improved in community involvement, improved environmental health and safety, and reduction in exposure to hazardous substances through these projects that you're supporting are going to be long-term outcomes associated with your project. So you have to have a robust recruitment strategy and use outreach partners. Do not just allow them, oh, I'm just going to put some flyers here. You want to have robust partners. And some ideas for that are vocational high schools within your target area, local labor union chapters, veteran service departments, chambers of commerce, community organizations, and local churches, and also re-entry programs. You want to have a screening process, and potential elements for that is you may have, for example, an age requirement, and you may require a high school diploma or GED. Or if someone is underage, you may require a parental consent, proof of legal work authorization, and possessing or being able to obtain a driver's license are common requirements. And then you may have an interview process in which you have an interest questionnaire, test for adult basic education and English language skills. If there are any physical limitations for certain trainings, like confined space training, for example, if you have that, or jobs, you want to ascertain that to match the people to the right type of training. And also, it's important to figure out the ability to consistently attend trainings, for example, family obligations and transportation. So talk to the people that you're recruiting, because if you are targeting a 70% completion rate and placement rate, you want to make sure that you catch any things up front. And this doesn't mean that you are going to reject necessarily people, but it may mean that you direct them to the right program. Or you may say, well, maybe you should do like the next cycle, or not this cycle, if you have this family obligation right now. There are many ways that you can support people to be successful during an interview process. So you also have to articulate your retention and attrition strategies. So as I mentioned before, identify barriers to completion early on, and have an advisory or mentoring or check-ins, frequent check-ins throughout the program, solicit feedback during the program and not only for completion, see if people are struggling with particular components. And you may want to build in flexibility to complete the program in different cycles. So if someone is like 3 weeks into it, but then they have a family emergency, you can allow them to come back in the next cycle to complete and get their certification. So program support, supported by the EPA grant, you can have job placement and referral, follow-up and reemployment strategies, and then student tracking. So these are allowable supports through the EPA grant, but you cannot actually you cannot charge staff time to train people on life skills, for personal mentoring, for legal, mental health, and personal issues. And I want to make a distinction here, because I think in my previous slide, I said mentoring, and here now I say, oh, no mentoring. So I want to clarify that. So here, the advisory, the mentoring, and the check-ins are very specific to the program completion, right? So that you're making sure that someone is meeting the program requirements, that they're catching up with any assignments if they have it, things like that. Whereas mentoring here is like more broad mentoring, like, well, what do you want to do with your life? What kind of job do you want to have, right? So that type of mentoring, it's not directly supported by the grant, but as I mentioned before, you may want to talk about additional resources that are available within your organization or with a partner organization that can provide some support or some referrals for people to deal with these issues. I want to mention here tax credits that may be also related to your program support. So at the federal level, there is the work opportunity tax credit. And so these are, incentivized employers that invest in American job seekers who have consistently faced barriers to employment. This act is authorized until the end of 2025. So you can see that there are several categories here that you can mention, in your proposal as incentives for employers to participate in your program. Section 5 is about partnerships, and these are actually equally rated or have equal points. So you do need to make sure that your pie is complete when you write your partnerships. So you want to have people that will help you place and provide on-the-job training. So as I mentioned before, if there are any recipients of recent Brownfield grants in your region, you want to reach out to them and have them be partners with you, economic development agencies as well. You want to have job readiness programs for supplemental training that I mentioned before, workforce development boards, one-stop centers, trade schools, community colleges. You want to have community partners to help you recruit, like citizen groups, churches, high schools, technical high schools, and then finally you want to have employers that are on board. So some additional resources, and these are linked through the slides that you have access to. So the Brownfields Toolbox is a one-stop site that has a lot of things on job training grants, best practices documents, webinars, a listserv. Look up who are the job training grantees from the last couple of years and reach out to people and ask questions if you have them. Obviously, the EPA job training website has the webinar and the guidelines. Past successful proposals. If you go, and I will quickly do this right now, I will go to the KSU tab website and show you how to navigate. So if you go to resources, actually I'm already here on resources, and you go to categories, you can go to sample successful grant proposals. You can navigate to last year, and there are several example job training successful grants. This is kind of like your guide. So go to those and see what other people did. And don't just look at one, look at several ones, because there's not only one successful strategy, there are many different ones. There are many different types of organizations, many different like range. So find the one that's kind of like closer to the type of organization and type of target area that you're dealing with. And contact your tab provider, right? We do proposal reviews. And so all of us have a lot of experience in looking at these type of grants. So make sure that you give us, a few days to review and give yourself a few days to address our comments. So don't get in touch on August 1st. Make sure that you do that at least a week in advance to have good amount of time. If you're not aware of what your provider is, these are the 10 regions. So there are 6 providers along the 10 regions. And again, you can find all of those on the slides. And so with that, I will pass it to Carrie, who's gonna talk to us a little bit about SAM.gov and grants.gov.
Thanks, Marissa. All right, just some quick other prep to make sure that you're doing. If you have not thought about SAM.gov until today, you are at the very last moment. You may be able to get everything squared away, but you want to go sign off of this immediately and go take care of it. So we'll talk just a little bit quickly about the 2 government websites that you need to be connected to in order to apply for any EPA grant, including the job training grants. Next slide. So you must complete a registration with SAM.gov, which is the website that anyone doing business with the federal government must be registered on. This is how they have all of your information about your organization, about your financial information in order to disperse funds to you. And then once you've been registered at SAM.gov, you have to register and connect that account with grants.gov, which is where you actually submit your proposal and all of the attachments. Next slide. So as I said, SAM.gov is the place where everyone must be registered in order to do business with the federal government. Hopefully you are already registered at SAM.gov and have maintained that active status. It does have to be renewed every year. So make sure that you are checking that regularly and well in advance of applying for any federal grant. You can check the status of your registration by going to SAM.gov and searching for it. It can take, this is information provided by SAM.gov. They say it can take at least 2 weeks or more to complete. In recent months, we have seen a much longer delay than that, and I would assume 3 or 4 weeks. If you've applied for federal funding in the past, especially the recent past, you may already have an account and a number, an identifying number. The best people to check with if you're not sure would be the director of your organization or your city manager, or maybe if you have a grants office or a financial manager, sometimes the city clerk will have this information. And that's where I would recommend starting if you are not sure about this yet. Next slide. Once you are registered in sam.gov, you'll be able to create a grants.gov account, which is the centralized location for to look for and apply for federal funding opportunities. Almost all federal funding opportunities are accepted through grants.gov, and all EPA Brownfield grants are. You must submit it through here. You should register in advance. And once you have your account on sam.gov, you can connect it and make sure everything is assigned appropriately so that you can get your application submitted appropriately and not run into a technical difficulty or a technicality that hurts an otherwise really solid application. Next time. I think that's it.
All right, and I see there are some questions. So I will pull up the chat now, and let's see. Okay.
I think a lot of the questions have been answered via the chat, but the one that came in most recently is, based on experience when reaching out to the community and employers, do you find going out and showing up in person works better than sending an email or a phone call?
We actually just had this this conversation yesterday with a community here in Maine. It does depend on your community, I would, and the size of your community. So, for example, yesterday we were up in Caribou, Maine, and because they are a very small community, what it works, the email and the calls really don't work. I would say that knocking door to door is too hard for you, but that's why the community-based organizations and the churches and the places, the community centers, the places where people aggregate is the places where you want to go and show up and then get a partner who's going to talk to the people. So create a network of individuals who will spread the word, so that you do not try it alone. I mean, your return on emails and calls is going to be very low. So I don't want to say that you shouldn't do that, but you should absolutely have a more robust way to directly reach out to people, but do that through people who have trust, right? So if you go to like a community leader, where, you know, if you're dealing, for example, with a Hispanic community and, you know, that community has a local church and they have, like, you know, events through that, talk to that leader. They're going to be your best advocate in terms of like reaching out to the people that you want to reach.
Great advice. Thank you. Let's see, any other questions coming in? That was a lot of great information, Marissa and Carrie. Thank you so much. We would like to know what you guys thought about today's webinar, its content, and how we did. So if you could take a few moments to complete the survey, we'll put the link in the chat, as well as you could use the QR code. One other question. Is on the life skills supplemental.
Yes.
Shakira, what is your question? She's saying, so she works in facilities, so the main training will be around those type of skills. But also wants to have training on life skills.
Yeah, so life skills training is unfortunately not supported by EPA training. However, what you can do is you can have, if you have any other resources, so if, you know, you can say that I have someone that can do this, and I want to leverage this program so that I have people like signed up and for that training program, and my life skills are going to be part of it. I'm just not going to use EPA funds to pay the person who's going to do it, right? So the training program that is paid by the EPA, right? Okay, good. So, and then actually this is a great form of leveraging because you are, giving people things that they need all in one package, and you're using EPA funds to fund what's eligible under this, and you're using other resources to support them and train them while they're there under the training program.
Yeah, and I think that that's my experience and what I've seen from grantees is that that's not uncommon, right? It makes a lot of sense to couple those things together, and you just have to make sure that the bills are paid appropriately. But a lot of grantees do things like that for sure.
And I do know that we went quickly over the EJ screen and all that census stuff. So if you, obviously you're going to have the recording to this, but also if you go to the, I will put the link here. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the entire link so that you don't look for it. So if you go to our Brownfields library and grant resources, there's a few videos here that you can also use.
All right, I see no more questions coming into the chat. So Marissa and Carrie, thank you for providing us all that information. Thank you to our attendees and our EPA folks that were on the line to help answer some of the questions that we received. And again, don't hesitate to reach out to any of your tab providers, Marissa or Carrie, and we will help you find the information you need. And if you want a review of your draft grant application, notify us and we can do that as well. So thanks everyone and have a wonderful afternoon.